Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing True Detective, and we're joined by Patrick and Nate, and we are on the finale episode, episode 8, titled A Form and Void. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. You definitely should have watched this before continuing to listen to this episode. All right, y'all. We've made it. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for the finale of True Detective Season 1.
An overlooked detail provides Hart and Cole with an important new lead in their 17-year-old case.
That's right. It is a 17-year-old case, man.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I forget about that, you know?
That
All
is
right.
such an intellectual synopsis of this episode. Pisses me off.
I think it covered everything.
The other one will make you more angry, Pat, because the other one has all the details.
No,
See, it's long and it's very detailed.
Read it into the record from top.
We've included the spoiler alert. Yes, there you go. Full right.
God.
I mean, let's make this a joyful episode and limit our torture of Pat as much as possible.
I like seeing Pat get fired up.
Well, I don't understand how that's joyful.
Okay, what were your episode titles of choice? Let's start with Sarah.
Mine is Totally Green.
That works on many levels. I like it. All right, Nate, what was yours?
We didn't get them all.
Yeah. All right, Pat, what was yours?
What's scented meat?
Of course. Mine was Circles and Constellations. Okay. Y'all, we made it. We made it to the finale episode. Patrick and Nate, you guys have seen this, so you have full free reign to talk about anything and everything in this episode. In our tradition, let's start with Sarah. Sarah, what do you think about this finale episode?
Oh, no.
It finally clicked.
The moment of truth, y'all.
Sure did it. Yeah, while I was happy that they solved the case finally, I was not into this episode very much at all. But I'm happy that they solved the case. You know, that's great that they can go live their lives. Now they're BFFs, you know. Go live your life. Be healthy, productive humans in society. And they caught the killer, which is great.
You know, when you're moving through life and you hear a song that you really liked from way back when that you used to listen to that you haven't listened to in a long time, or you catch a smell or a scent, probably not meat, that seems familiar, and it like transports you back, reconnects you to an emotional space you've occupied before. And hopefully, if it's positive, it's a nice experience. With no disrespect, Sarah, the way you have talked about True Detective, it's like that one coworker who kept trying to point out the upsides of the last season of Game of Thrones. And emotionally, I'm distressed.
I'm very sorry, Pat. So my goal of this episode is that I speak as little as possible. Like you guys can talk about how great this show is. And hopefully Pat's heart will grow 3 sizes after I have stomped on it for 7 episodes.
You might be the reason I live out the rest of my life as a Grinch.
No,
I'm kidding. That was a little mean. That's a little mean. We'll stop it pushing children on.
Yes, the slides haven't been mentioned yet. Yeah. Okay, Patrick and Nate, I feel like y'all have done an elegant job of sharing your thoughts and opinions episode by episode, while also exhibiting an incredible amount an incredible amount of restraint, so as not to spoil the wondrous experience that Sarah and I have had. So I'm curious to hear your full, free carefree thoughts about both the season as a whole and also the way that the show has chosen to wrap up so many of these storylines. Tell us your thoughts.
You mean now that we're not running across Ledoux's minefield that is like meth shed, which is what it's felt like here and there, trying to not say things?
Which, looking back in this season, I didn't realize how much of a difficult task that was, especially with this being a detective story and so many of those insights that you've figured out how much do we as the viewers know versus the characters know. It was not easy.
Yeah.
Y'all made it. We're free now.
Do you want to go, Pat?
No, please. You, my friend.
Me? Okay. I always sort of found this to be a disappointing ending. A little bit.
What? I'm shocked.
Well, I still love the show, like, all the way through. I always found this to be like sort of, not super like satisfying of an ending. Like, they build up this thing that has like all this sprawl and everything, and then it's just one weird dude in the woods that they capture or they kill. And yeah, that was always kind of a bummer. But I think on like reflection and repeat viewings and everything, I like it more and more just because it's like, I don't know, feels more real. Even if it's like not super satisfying. Like, life is often like that, where you build up this kind of like big thing and then it just doesn't, it doesn't like, it's not as satisfying as you hoped it would be. And I think that there are other shows that do this that I found disappointing on first watch that I like a lot in rewatch, but I don't even, shit, I put myself into another I painted myself into a spoiler corner because one of those shows is one that I know y'all haven't seen yet. But yeah, that's my initial take on this episode.
I'm surprised.
I respect your opinion. And Sarah, I respect your opinions too, even though they are objectively incorrect. Nate, I disagree.
Okay.
All right, let's hear it.
Because
wonderful.
Let's go.
I think, to your point, I agree about the realness of the ending, but I appreciate that there's like a soft simplicity to it. And I feel like so many times shows get so caught up in wanting to button everything up that they get sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
And the last episode, maybe even 2 episodes, like the way they're even trying to shoehorn their way to the last episode can just feel very disjointed and messy. And so in this one, it was like, it feels like they were very intentional about, this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and that's all we're going to do, type of thing. And I'm at peace with that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we necessarily disagree. I think that I was disappointed. I was definitely disappointed on first watch. And this is one of the episodes that I think I like rewatching the least. Because it's all plot. Like, I know what happens, and there's not really a lot of great banter between the two characters, which is one of the things that I love the most. And it's just like tying it all off,
I think that there's good banter at the end, but it's not banter that's contentious. It's like their victory lap. It's like we're still mouthing off at each other, but it's all from a place of love now, instead of like, I actually have a gripe with you.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know the disappointment on first watch. Is it with the way that the case itself wrapped up, or is it the way that they handled the characters?
It was the way that the case itself wrapped up. It was the plot, and the lack of conclusion with the sprawl and like all the people in the videotape and all that kind of stuff, that it felt like it was building something larger, and then it like narrows in at the end.
But they also address that, which I think is very self-aware. And
I agree.
He's a rust. He's like, we can't get them all. God dang.
I also have a pet peeve in suspenseful, like, I don't know, endings or whatever like this, where like someone's being hunted and like the other one's doing the hunting, and the person that's being hunted is like throwing their voice around everywhere and like they can't pin it down. It's just like such a trope, and it's just like one of those things where it's just like there's like what one place in the world where this would actually work like acoustically. Like we can't do this in every show. You can't do this in a field.
Nathan, yes. Why are you getting so fired up, little priest?
Who said that?
Which direction did it come from?
Yeah, that's a I understand that that's my own personal pet peeve, though. That doesn't make it bad in any way.
We welcome all personal pet peeves here. So, but Pat, it sounds like for you on first watch and successive watches, this finale works for you.
Yeah, I'd say so, because I feel like in the episode 6 and 7, they weren't ramping up the amount of people that could be targeted. So it felt like it was very like fluid, kind of, with how much was bitten off that we, sat in the sidecar with as the viewer. Like it would have, if all of a sudden it was like, just crammed into the ending, like the news report that we kind of hear, and it's like, oh, the attorney general has dismissed claims that this is related to. If it just became that same scene, but it was like, and now this politician's been arrested, and this one, and this one, and this one, it would have felt just kind of like lazy, So, and I feel like I've seen that before. Or the other thing is you watch something, and in like the last couple episodes before the finale, it's like all of a sudden we're just gonna make all these people appear who are gonna be part of like the big like climactic ending, and it's like these people haven't been like relevant or like a significant part of the story that we've been watching for the majority.
Mm-hmm. I agree with all that. I don't think it could have necessarily been done better. I'm just, I think it was by design, but it is like, unsatisfying on watch.
I think for me, I also feel that because it is a character, it's like such a character forward show. I feel like they did a really good job with how they ended that piece of it. And so the case, which we know is kind of like just a vehicle, a shuttle to keep us going from episode to episode, much to Sarah's dismay, which I understand and I agree with. That wasn't what I was looking for in the end. I was looking for like I would have been pissed off if it was like, all right, Russ, I'm leaving the hospital. I'll come pick you up on Saturday. Bye. And they didn't have this bigger experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually really appreciated that they didn't solve the entire whole unraveling of the case. I think, Nate, you mentioned this earlier. It's a little bit more true to life. Like, it takes a lot to overthrow an entire system of corruption of generations, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think it actually strengthens the character catharsis that we get at the end of Rust realizing that he's not going to find his worth in being able to overthrow and redeem the system, but in and of himself, he's made progress. I was surprised by how sentimental the ending was. That was shocking to me. I think that the show has been so gritty and so raw in a lot of ways, and the last 15 minutes are like oddly just tugging on every heartstring. I mean, I ate it up in the moment. Not gonna lie, like I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. But I think that they perhaps, I think for me personally, if they'd scaled that back a little bit, I think it would have actually packed a bigger punch for me. So the whole like, Marty getting him the box of cigarettes in this nice little like ribbon wrapped box. Like it's so sentimental that I would have loved just like a smaller, more toned down little moment of him handing him his favorite pack of cigarettes, and them maybe not having that full conversation, but maybe like a scaled down version, and implied the sense of redemption between these two men who have achieved a level of growth and redemption and catharsis. Like I think they almost swung so far to the other side that I was like, oh, this is a lot sweeter than I was expecting from this show. It leaves you with all the good, like, you know, warm fuzzies. But I think that for the characters, I would have loved something a little bit more toned down. My personal opinion. But I'm curious your all's thoughts on from the character perspective, where they take both Marty and Rust on a character journey in this episode.
Sarah, I'm curious your thoughts. Genuinely.
Yeah, it was way too happy for me. It was like too like it felt like sickly sweet to me and kind of incongruous with the rest of the show. So I mean, that's great. Go be BFFs. Love that for you. I did not enjoy watching that as much because it didn't seem to match the rest of it for me. But they just went through a traumatic experience together. They just saved each other's lives. So I guess it makes sense. But yeah, I wish that was not as, like, I don't know, happy ending. I wish that there was a little bit of a downer in there. Doesn't have to be like super down, but just it was a little too much for me. I'm sorry, Pat.
You don't have to apologize. The image that popped into my head was you standing over the DVD box set with a bottle of lighter fluid, just shaking it, and then just throwing a match on it and being like, this is how I feel about you as a whole, like body and character.
Oh, man. Yeah, Nate, Pat, I'm curious your thoughts on the way that they take the character journeys for these two men that we've been following.
Yeah.
Like first viewing and now what I'm assuming is end viewings later.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it's a little saccharine at the end. It's a little sweet. Like I guess
there you go with your $25 words.
That's a good one.
Sorry, that threw me off.
He does that sometimes.
But yeah, so I think I see where they were kind of going with it. Like, you know, you've had this sort of like pessimistic, depressed character the whole time, and like you kind of end the show on like him saying something that's actually somewhat like of an optimistic perspective. I thought that was kind of like, I don't know, neat after like a near-death experience and like some sort of like brush against something that sort of like runs counter to a lot of his like beliefs and perspective and everything. I thought that was like a little interesting. I think it all happened a little bit fast, and yeah, it was a little sweet at the end. Like I think, I don't know, I like the buddiness in episode 7 where they're like working on something together and like they're kind of like more comfortable with each other, more than I like the arm in arm walking off into the well, not the sunset, but you know what I mean.
The metaphorical sunset, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Personally. Patrick.
Yeah, I agree that it's a little overdone, overcooked from a sensitivity standpoint. I do think it was a well thought out place to land the characters, though. Maybe they could have executed differently, like Rust being optimistic, Rust having to I'm gonna do what Nate does. Having to stare his mortal coil down face to face.
Yeah.
Don't roll your eyes at me. But also too, like, aside from the theme at hand, which I think it was interesting because the light versus dark, and we didn't get them all, and there's this, threads you can pull on about how those relate those themes across the larger end of this narrative. And that they did bring light into the world by getting the one dude. And there will continue to be darkness, but that's just what it is. But I do think that it was a brave choice, and I'd rather them have done it this way than not done it at all, to have this moment of vulnerability with Rust that is so, like, the opposite of every way he showed up in the show so far. Or not so far, because we're done, but throughout. Because his moments of vulnerability prior to this are very, very short, and like they have a period at the end. Like, I've struggled with alcohol before, period. Nothing goes any deeper than that. Nothing goes any further than that.
Yeah, and they've been through much with each other. Like, I think, even in the IMDb summary of this being like 17 years and that history that they have together, I think help lends itself to a little bit more of the understanding of they've been like through thick and thin together and been at each other's side through so much, that they really have gone on this journey together. I think that what's most compelling is more the personal growth that they both seem to have experienced and have realized versus the actual like warmth of their relationship together, which maybe is just a byproduct of this like softening in both of them. But I think that the moment with Marty breaking down in the hospital bed surrounded by his family saying like, I am fine, and then he immediately breaks down, like that is a moment of catharsis for a person who has suppressed so much and been in denial for so much of his life, right? And then Pat, to your point around Rust and this vulnerability and this like hopefulness that he's finally had, that he's been devoid of for so long, like that is like, I'm more excited about the growth for them as individuals than this walking off into the sunset arm in arm together, reconciliation. Granted, and they have like been in life and death situations for each other and like fought for each other in the middle of the depths of this like in Carcosa, so perhaps there's bonds that are formed that I just cannot empathize with. But I think it's the relational sweetness that feels more than the actual like growth and redemption for the two characters individually. I think that the character growth is most compelling more than the relational.
That's fair. I mean, as you laid it out just then, it makes me think about anyone who I've ever known who served in the military and the way they revere their relationships and like that brotherhood or brother sisterhood with like the people they served with, like to go through such a unique experience that is incomprehensible, even though it's dramatized to regular people, is incomprehensible to understand or be able to relate to the actual experience. Like, I think there's like that's exactly what they went through.
That's true. They do, like in that final fight, I think they each get like an opportunity to save the other's life.
I did appreciate the conversation earlier in the episode about in the car about their fight. It's like, you really think you could have put me down? And it's just like, you two assholes. Not, but yes, keep going because I'm enjoying this.
I'm really glad they didn't kill off either of the two characters. I think that would have been a much cheaper, huh?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have been a much cheaper like version of this ending, and probably far less meaningful, but maybe more like emotionally dramatic in the moment for the viewing experience. But when Russ shows up in that like final 30-minute climactic scene and he's wearing a crisp white button up, I was like, oh no. And he's like fearlessly going through this labyrinth. I was like, oh, please do not do what I think you're going to do. And I really appreciate that they take him to the edge of death, but they don't really actually kill him off. I think it would have been a cheaper, like emotional gut punch, which, is effective, but I think would have been a little bit less meaningful what the show's trying to say about these two characters. So I'm really glad they didn't do that.
I agree, and I think it would have been also disingenuous to the surviving character, because they would have like layered on all this how they feel about the other person like being killed, and that would have felt very awkward and not grounded in who these people are as we know them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think for much of the show, Rust is kind of this anti-hero, and that's often the trajectory that they'll take with an anti-hero like him, is like he's so relentlessly fighting for justice at the cost of, and like without, consideration for his life. And that's part of what makes him great. But also, I'm just glad they didn't do it. I'm so glad they didn't go there. I would have been upset. I would have been so upset.
I feel like that's also one of those things that it's just kind of known, like, don't do this. And you'll have like a period of years where like the most popular shows don't do that. And then at some point, just like rebooting Spider-Man, some asshole's like, hey, I have an idea. Let's do this. And one of the major streaming services did that in the final episode of one of their series that was very popular in the last couple of years, and people were outraged. So now I think we're going back into another sleeper period of, let's not be them. But inevitably, 5 years will be some hit show. It'll happen.
Yeah, it's just emotionally cheap. Like, I'm gonna be upset. I'm invested in this character. You just don't play with my emotions like that,
This wasn't.
I'm already tied around your finger. Don't do that.
This wasn't the type of show, like the plot wasn't going this way. But the other thing that they could have done that feels very cheap is like they basically portray the death of a main character, and then they show up in a small town, like a logging town somewhere else, starting a new life with a new name, and it's just like,
heck no.
Really? Do you think that little of me as a human being with ideas and emotions and some semblance of intelligence that you can get away with this and it's going to be okay?
Or Michael Caine will cheers them from across a crowded restaurant.
Sarah, I saw your face, so I know that you at least know one of the two things that I'm thinking about that followed that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I got the second one. I don't know the first one. But yeah. I follow you.
So what y'all think of the show as a whole? Because they never made any more after this.
Well, that's because it's pedestrian
Nate's
rubbish.
suffering from Marty's self-delusion, I'm thinking.
Literally just told you 2 days ago that season 4's trailer just dropped Jodie Foster's out of retirement. Clarice Sterling back in action.
I think your mic's cutting out. I can't hear anything.
I do think that the way that a creator ends the season of a show is fascinating, because it is the final thesis on who they believe these characters to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that these creators end the show believing in these characters, I think, is inherently pretty fascinating. Not just one or the either, which is kind of a version that I was kind of envisioning, which is these two men who are flawed and broken in different ways. Like, there could have been hope for one and not for the other, or some mixed perspective, but the fact that both of them have hope for the future and hope for healing and hope for redemption, I think is just like a really unexpected ending for these two characters. Like, when this show started, I thought that this was going to end with kind of this cynical perspective on society and human nature and whatnot, and be a little bit more gritty of a ending for these two characters. But inherently, this show's thesis is that no matter how broken and far gone that you are, that like in your endeavors and in your efforts, like, you matter, you make an effect, it is a worthy endeavor to try to fight for justice, and that through that there's hope for you, which I think is I think that there's just a lot of shows and films these days that take a far more cynical perspective, and it was oddly maybe just jarring and surprising for me in our current time to see a show that is so hopeful about these two very different men that are, you know, flawed and broken in very different ways, to end with hope for both of them. I was just surprised by. And so I think that is kind of a fascinating thesis of this show. I'm very intrigued to see where they take the character journeys for the other seasons. And if it is along a similar vein, I would assume that it would have to be different to, you know, round out this, you know, collective like anthology of stories. But that feels like such a significant stance or stake in the ground for what they believe about human nature that I think is pretty fascinating for both these two men and their relationship together too, you know.
I think there's something to be said though about the creative process, because it's a spectrum, right? On the one hand, you can have someone who's like, no, this is my vision, and it's going to be executed and actualized exactly as it came out of my brain. And then you can have things where, and I believe this is part of what Lost's problem was, which I've been talking in, you know, theoreticals and not naming names, but Lost, I'm naming you. And viewer, if you haven't seen Lost, you're welcome. Don't watch it. That same year, Prison Break came out, and both of those shows were hits. Lost a little more so, but they actually did like user feedback studies. And there were characters, I know specifically for Prison Break, that were supposed to be killed off. There was a character that was supposed to be killed off in the 4th episode of the 1st season. But because they had such a fan response, like appreciation response, that character somehow, some way made it to the end of the series. And so I think when that happens, it can be difficult because as a writer who has this construct in your head, now you've deviated from the path. So at some point, you're trying to like patch and fix something or adjust something, which can inevitably, you know, make things become disjointed. And I think Lost was kind of the same way because they had so many characters and they tried to be like unapologetic about who they kind of killed off or whatever. But then when they became fan favorites, they were like, well, we have to keep these people around because these are the people that all the fans like. And then that, you know, changes how they're executing. So it's
Lost
kind of
also a side tangent, but Lost also suffers from like the mystery box with like no plan, like problem where it's just like they just like keep building up all these interesting questions with no plan on how to answer them. So, you know, talk to me in 5 years when everyone talks about how shitty Severance is as a TV show.
I will be there as well. Right there with you.
I completely agree. And we've already talked about how anytime you're just like, oh crap, we bit off more than we can chew. There's magic. Like, fuck that in my face.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because, like, how much do you put effort into understanding what you think the viewers want and starting to adapt to that versus we're just going to run our course and it's going to be what it's going to be, which is largely why I feel like a lot of people, part of the reason people really loved the first few seasons of Game of Thrones. But then when the creator didn't even know what he was going to do because he got a huge paycheck and wasn't motivated to finish, it was just like, hey.
Well, also they ran out of source material.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And he didn't write the books to keep up. And it was just like, well, here's a couple ideas I had. Hey, you two showrunners, just run with this. And they're like, well, we don't know what to do, but we believe in ourselves, which they shouldn't have. And then, you know, what happens, happens.
George R.R. Martin was like, no, I make money now, not books.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's like speaks to why I really love, well, this show and just in general, like miniseries, like stories told over like multiple episodes, but like that are just one season, basically. So I think that's why I dug this show so much at the time.
I feel like miniseries,
and they never made anymore.
They set out to execute their vision, and they're like, maybe this will become something else or something bigger, or maybe it won't. But this is what we're doing. Whereas I feel like some of them, like primetime cable dramas, they're like, oh, we want this to be our next 5-year show.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to put in the work to gauge audience interests and respond and things like that. Personally, I'm a big miniseries fan over the other option.
I'm intrigued from both of your perspectives what it was about the show that was so compelling. Both initially and then as you've engaged with it more. Like, what's the most captivating part of it?
Yeah, I think the character parts I dig a lot. I think that that's sort of like seeing these two different characters that like are like polar opposites in a lot of ways, but both have like sort of this like misaligned or like lost sense of purpose, kind of like struggling to feel like they want to do good in the world, but you know, feeling like the world is somewhat designed to discourage that and having to face like face that on like a day-to-day basis. And like, yeah, I don't know, some of that's personal. Like when this came out, I was working like in finance at the time, and I wasn't feeling very good about what I was doing in my day-to-day. So there's like, you know, it was, you know, there's a piece of that that was like, oh, I get that. And then yeah, just like, you know, seeing them play off of each other. Like I'm a big sucker for dialogue vehicles, like just shows and movies and stuff with like really good dialogue. I just latch on to. Like I've already rewatched Banshees of Inisherin. I like it more and more every time I watch it. Like Big Lebowski, anything that like it, like where the plot doesn't even matter. It's just like the dialogue is excellent, and like you have these characters playing off of each other. It's like I dig that stuff a lot. And yeah, like the characters are well developed. I think like the narrative structure with the 3 different timelines works really well for me. I think like it's a very effective way to tell the story, and I really love the way that sort of like through their narration through these like police interviews or whatever they are, like the different sort of lies and details that get like shown through that, I just really like the texture and like aesthetic of the show and like the setting. I dig a lot, and like, you know, the show swings for the fences with that oneer in that episode that's just like so like intense basically the whole time. Like all that stuff really works for me. I still like it a lot. I think it's very, very good. I don't think this rewatching. I don't think Sarah succeeded in
I'm glad
convincing
that
me it's a piece of shit.
Yeah, I'm glad that my bad takes did not negatively affect your experience watching this show. I'm sorry, Pat, that I destroyed your heart, but I'm glad that Nate, you were not bothered.
So, Sarah, how many times realistically do you think you could rewatch this season between now and the end of the calendar year? Until it clicks.
Why would I rewatch this? I've done it once. I put
But
in
you did
my
it wrong.
time.
Nate just
The
said.
beatings will continue until the takes get better.
Oh no. I am unavailable for all of those dates. I'm so sorry. My calendar is booked.
A monthly check-in. Does it work for you yet? No? Okay. See you next month. Have a good Thanksgiving.
I haven't watched this show in 5 years. We can stop doing this.
Plot twist, all of our movies and us recordings are just me bringing up. And now we're on episode 3, Sarah. of True Detective.
Yeah.
Pat, what about you?
I really also like the aesthetic and the like tone of the cinematography. That really, I remember grabbing me the first time I watched it. And it also, there was something about the slowness that I really appreciated, because I feel like a lot of times shows try to like have these explosive moments, and that becomes just like overdone. And it was just like, nah, we're just here moving at our own very slow pace. And as someone who also appreciates like really good and kind of thorough like character execution. Like, I mean, this was just fantastic. Also, because it it was like a buddy cop show that kind of said fuck you to the buddy cop formula. The buddy cop formula always has contention in the beginning, and then it's like, within 90 minutes, the last 10 minutes, like we save each other's lives and we're best pals. And it was like, no, we hate each other for like a long time. And we also have things that like you can't just push away, like Rust and Maggie and things like that. And so you actually had to see them like adapt and grow through that, as opposed to like, yeah, I'm pissed because at the beginning of the movie, like you drove my car into a street pole and that made me mad. Like, and I'm gonna get over it. So just their banter, their talking, I really appreciated. Obviously, the episode, Nate, that you referred to where they swung to the fences was fantastic. And I think that was when I was like, wow, this show is dumb good. I also, and I've talked to Jen about this, I like characters who like know that they have to operate within like some amount of constraint in their societal or, legal experience, but they're like, I'm gonna do it my own way. And it's fine. And I feel very much like I get that from Rust. It's like Marty's like, no, this is how we play the game. This is how things are done. He's like, that's cool, no. And so that kind of like bucking and being a little like uh just different and out there, like I eat that shit up all day. And to your point, Nate, you brought up the Big Lebowski, which Jen, if I recall, when we first started working together and we had our movie swaps, that was one of the first ones, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Right. And like Walter is an example of someone who's just like, I'm gonna do shit the way it makes sense in my head. Not to the point necessarily where I'm gonna go to jail, although we got close, but like I'm just gonna do it the way it makes sense to me. I love that shit.
I feel like also when this came out, and this is more of like the experience at the time and probably more personal, but like I feel like this is one of the last shows where like the people that I was talking to or like the people that I cared about, like we were all kind of watching it in lockstep together as it was coming out. I feel like that hasn't happened again other than Game of Thrones, which mostly came out like after this for a lot of it. But I mean, that whole thing is just completely soured in my mind. So this is like the last sort of positive experience I have in that sense.
There's something magical about that experience, I think.
Yeah.
Of just, having the same questions and the same reactions in the same period of a couple days. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that like in general with like TV shows, but also just movies too. Like I guess the closest we've had recently is like the Barbenheimer whole thing, where everyone's like, what did you think, the following Monday? But it adds to the experience of getting to hear all your friends' reactions to characters and moments that make the experience a lot more rich. Yeah. I think that the show is strongest when it really is just these two characters with very differing worldviews, like discoursing together in a car.
I agree.
With bad projections in the background, according to Nate. Like I think that's the like magic sauce of the show is just them bantering about philosophical perspectives or not about the world. Like that's the strongest part. And then everything else swirling around them is just like things for them to bump up against so that they can like enter into those conversations again. I think that's really where the show shines the most.
All right, Jen, message received. From now on, when we're in the office together on our one Wednesday a week, I will bring up the psychosphere every friggin' Wednesday, and we can just go to town on random babble.
Love it. Are there bad projections of the Microsoft campus? It's an essential part of this experience. Yes.
Sorry. I also, Nate, I think you said this to me, and I shared it with mutual friends, and they ate that shit up. But I also, another big thing for me was the reconnaissance. Because,
Oh, interesting.
like, this is 10, 11 years old now. And, like, my entire experience of Matthew McConaughey was, oh, that guy. Like, shrug. It's
Sweet
really
Home Alabama or whatever garbage rom-com of the week he was in for
right.
It's bad.
And he's actually talked about that in podcasts. He's like, there's a formula to those. You get like 40 million, you get like less than half of what a standard action movie will be like. And he like laid it all out, and he's basically was like, yeah, I was that guy. And I feel like similarly, so I appreciated being like, this dude like took classes, like what is going on? Like Woody Harrelson, I had appreciated throughout childhood and growing up in different things, and I think he has a lot of like Woody Harrelson breadth. Like he can play different characters very, very well. There's no typecasting that I really can feel like I've seen with him. Matthew McConaughey, it was like, okay, you're that guy, and then it was like, it is dumb how impressive your acting is right now. And so I do think, to Nate's point, that is a disadvantage for people seeing it for the first time now, because he's now, been that guy for so long that it's kind of like, whatever.
It was still novel at the time. I think Dallas Buyers Club came out like the year before this or something.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this was like the bang bang, like Dallas Buyers Club and then True Detective, and people were like,
right.
Oh, he can actually act.
And similarly, on this journey with him was Bradley Cooper, who I feel like I only saw as an asshole in comedy movies, who had no depth and was just a dude who was a dick. Like, literally, he was in, what was that movie? It was so good. It wasn't. Failure to Launch. Matthew McConaughey. Bradley Cooper is his dick friend who's just an asshole the whole time. And then you had Wedding Crashers a few years before that, where he was the asshole fiance to Owen Wilson's the main girl or whatever, right? So it's like, it's like he's that guy, and Matthew McConaughey's that guy, and now they're both like incredibly revered acting talents, and so I think it's cool to see those evolutions.
I did have that thought during this finale episode. I was like, man, this dude can act. Like, I think he carries the show in a lot of ways. Far more than Woody Harrelson does. I think the like rust charisma, the rust factor of it all, I think like really draws you in. This doesn't work without him.
Maggie, but continue.
I think he elevates it for sure, but I don't know. I think Woody Harrelson does a fantastic job with it.
I also think you couldn't have Rust show up and like that character be what it was without a Marty.
Yeah, without
so like the support was almost just as necessary part of the package. It's like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. You had to have Scottie there. Scottie wasn't there. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who's Michael Jordan and who's Scottie Pippen?
Yeah.
And then that means that Maggie effectively was Dennis Rodman.
Wow, this metaphor just took a weird turn. But
keeps going.
That's all right. Any more you want to keep going down the metaphor?
No, I think I'm good.
Now we need to watch the other miniseries, which is basically the same show.
The Last Dance.
Yeah.
That time that Dennis ran away to Las Vegas with Carmen Electra is just like when Maggie went to Russ' apartment. It's the same fucking thing.
It all fits. So what was the dumb thing that I said? How did this start? Why did we watch this show?
Because
someone claimed that this was the best show of all time on television ever in all of humanity.
I definitely never fucking said that.
All of history.
This has never been my number one.
I'm just saying.
You did not use as many syllables as Jen did. You literally said it's probably the best season of television that's ever been created.
Which is exactly what I just said.
And don't even
yes.
I must have said standalone season. Right?
No. No. And you can't even necessarily reject that there's potential truth to this, which is absolutely true because I was there. You said it to me. I remember. Because literally within the last year, you said about Last of Us episode 3, it more or less is like probably one of the greatest episodes of television that's ever.
One of. Yeah, that's what I always say, one of.
Oh.
No, actually, what you say is it might be the greatest episode of
That's
television
not
ever
fucking
created.
true.
It might be the
I
greatest
always say
season of
one of.
television.
One of is more of a cop out, which is why I always say it.
No, your cop out is
In a
might
court of
be.
law.
Your cop out is might be. That means everyone else sits to the side.
Might be the greatest. Which is equivalent to one of the
That's
greatest.
Pat James flair right there. That's the spin.
Do you want to challenge my memory? Do we want to do this right now?
You're fabricating a story.
How many glasses of whiskey have either of you consumed on each side? I'm sticking my train to.
I cussed you out on the phone when you said it about The Last of Us because I was like, you son of a bitch, you keep denying the True Detective claims, and here you go again. I said it. I was like, you remember this moment.
No, I stand by what I actually said, which is one of.
There was no one of. It was might be.
That episode is
which
great,
is
though.
arguably
have you seen
the
it?
same thing as one of.
Have we watched it? Well, we can't. We probably shouldn't talk about it on this show, but yeah.
Last of Us? Pat, have you seen The Last of Us? Oh? Oh, okay. Did you make it to episode 3?
Yeah,
do we concur?
Do
we concur with the hyperbolic statements that were thrown out into the ethers?
In spirit,
silence.
But
there's silence.
But
this is not looking promising.
But in literal proclamation, nah.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know what that means.
You're not supposed to. Talking in rhetoric. I'm gonna run for president. This is how you do it.
Okay, let's see. Let's walk it back. Nate might have said some one ofs, might ofs, might be's. Those. Descriptive phrases. But someone else might have claimed and staked a job potentially on the statements of one ofs, might ofs, the best season of all time. I don't know who would have maybe done that.
Hopefully they're not in the same job, so there's no risk of them having to actualize that condition.
What was this statement?
It was derivative from your bullshit that you inceptioned in my brain.
Blame this on me. You make your own decisions.
Was like
everybody has a choice, like Russ says.
3 weeks in. Right, Pat? Like 3 weeks in of you in this new job.
Yeah, you might not even have watched Friday by that time.
I didn't even know you, the fullness of you yet.
Right.
I didn't even see Friday yet, man.
Yeah. I basically said to Jennifer, if you don't think it is like, and I did say one of the best seasons of television you've ever seen, I'll quit this job.
That's one of little phrase. These 5 letters are really screwing with us, y'all.
Look.
You gotta stand behind the best or not the best. What is this middle gray area of one ofs, might be's?
I have 2 things to say.
I mean, life isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's gray areas.
We ain't gonna get them all.
Sometimes we ain't gonna get them all.
I have 2 things to say about this. And one is, Nate, own your conviction.
What?
Last year, I said what I thought was going to be the movie of the year in April. And guess what? It was.
I feared you would bring this up.
Own that.
You got lucky.
And I'm going to carry that with me forever. I did not get lucky.
Yeah, you did.
You would
have called that for Mad Max or any other fucking movie that you get so excited about.
Listen, so I'm just saying, be brave and have the courage to own your claims.
So, Nate, what were you saying about that Patrick Flair a couple minutes ago? What was that again?
That's just how he
just
massages the truth.
Again, if I'm going into politics, I have to be an expert at that. No. This also, Nate made a claim before both of these other claims that he's now backpedaling on, which there was some whiskey involved, and there always is. There was passion. Like, you were convicted in being like, no, you will hear what I say and you will understand, which was.
Wait, is this? I don't know if I want this read into the record.
He
Is
said,
this personal or is this an opinion about a piece of entertainment?
entertainment.
Okay.
Personal
Sometimes
to
I
you.
don't know if you remember we're recording.
Sometimes I hate Patrick's like impeccable memory. You know, it's just inconvenient sometimes.
And Jen, you've only been
I
on
know
the
it's
bus
only
for
been a
2
couple years.
years.
I know. Nate, I empathize with what you've had to deal
Oh, he's not a victim. Shush.
with.
Sitting on the couch, and he says, "The first season of The Last Airbender is the greatest television season ever, and I will watch the entire series of any show you tell me to, just so you will watch that." And I was like, "Do you want me really to throw 18 seasons of Law and Order at you right now?" And you were like, "I fucking will. I fucking will."
This is that bullshit. So I never said that. I'll
Yes,
tell
you
you what I
did.
said because I remember it and I still stand by it. I said it's the greatest television show of all time. I didn't pick a specific season.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice
It
to.
is. This is great.
I
I was willing to
mean-
watch all of X-Files.
Wow.
That was not the arrangement with me.
No, because I was arguing with Peter. You were just listening.
No, we had a different
Antagonizing.
argument. We had a different argument because
I would
I
never.
think you had this
I
argument
was interested in X-Files. I would never agree to watch Law and Order, no matter how much whiskey I had.
Yeah.
with a couple
I mean,
glasses of
I would agree
whiskey.
to watch Law and Order if I watched the way Pat does, which is on the fourth screen that he has in the background as ambiance for his productive time.
Exactly.
Lovely soundtrack to my workday.
Avatar: The Last Airbender rules. I love that show. I will die on that hill.
That's all record.
Yeah.
There's no might be's.
Well,
one ups.
All I can say is, fuck you. It's good to see you commit to something.
Good stuff.
Do y'all have favorite shows? Hosts? Sorry that we argued for like 5 minutes.
I have been advocating. I've been advocating for Patrick to watch Succession. Nate, I would also like to advocate for you to endure the torture that would be the show.
Actually, you guys just did it, but I feel like if Nate and I watched it, there's a strong chance that Nate and Sarah would switch places, and that would be a fun experience for you and I.
That would be really fun.
But they're not going to go through the whole effing show again.
Well, maybe we watch the first season and then we drop in and we just do the whole season in one episode in terms of its general, how it's received as opposed to
what is it? It's a 4-season show.
4 seasons. I would say, Sarah, thoughts on? I personally think the 4th season's the strongest. Season 1 is exposition, 2 and 3, solid. But 4, like the way a show ends, tells you everything you need to know about the quality of the writing.
Cool.
So basically what I'm saying is you need to watch 3 seasons to get to the 4th season.
The first 30 hours, they're okay.
Sarah, what are your thoughts?
You gotta power through them to get to that last 10 hours.
So I binge watched the first season in a weekend.
I was just going to bring that up. You said that, which is why we need to talk about the first season.
I was hooked on that show, but I also understand why, Nate, you wouldn't enjoy this show just because of the characters and the subject matter, though I think the writing style and some of the direction you would really enjoy. So I think you would enjoy like the technical elements if you could push past everything else about the show.
My hatred of filthy rich people.
Yeah. So I understand if you don't want to watch that.
There would be a lot to It's been brought up so much that I feel like I'm missing out.
Yes, you are. That is correct. Yeah, Sarah emerged out of this weekend of Succession being like, Jen, I'm in a weird headspace, man. I was like, I can imagine.
Yeah, I would
You've
not
been in the minds of
recommend.
manipulative
Yeah.
rich people, I don't blame you.
Yeah. Don't watch a season of Succession in a weekend. It's not a great idea.
I did tell Jen that I would watch Succession after we
You
wrapped our
did.
True Detective recording, so it is on deck.
And the time
For
is
me.
here.
It
We have
is.
arrived.
It is. It's interesting that you say that you can understand why some of the characters would not grip Nate, because he can't say the same thing about you.
I still think it's the true mystery.
It's the what?
We didn't get them all. We didn't get any of them. We haven't cracked anything.
I know. Tuttle's still out there. Stara's still running around wild.
Sorry, guys.
Not to compare you, but
yeah, that
you know,
I mean,
you get what
I've already been accused of pushing children off slides. So like,
yeah, but what Jen said was
can only take so much slander.
Like, what Jen said, I feel like is way darker and way worse.
You read into that, man. I'm just saying. I have questions.
I'm just asking questions.
I'm just asking questions. I'm asking the right questions. All right. Any other last thoughts about True Detective as a show all up finale? Any other closing thoughts?
Well, clearly we need to go back and re-record the first 3 episodes after Sarah watches it and gets to where she needs to get to with the show.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath for that, Pat.
That's fine. It's not fine, but okay.
I'm curious for you two how the experience was going episode by episode, like talking about it and analyzing each episode and the experience of kind of reviewing the show.
Yeah, I definitely brought a more critical eye than I have before, which is, I don't know what I think about it. It isn't always the best thing to watch something that you like with a critical eye. But like I sort of alluded to earlier, I don't think I've like super soured on my like opinion of it, but I do think that like the stuff that works the best for me, like I highlighted earlier, is like the dynamic of the 2 characters and all that. Mm-hmm. Definitely interesting rewatching a show with people who haven't seen it before and then discussing it episode by episode. That was a unique challenge I've never done before.
Yes, indeed. What about you, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great time with all of these conversations, and I always enjoy rewatching it. I think the only thing for me was watching it week to week was weird, as opposed to just like watching a pocket of it and then feeling satisfied and going about my business.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, because I have a note, the thing that I was going to bring up that I was like, oh shit, did I say too much, was when I asked the question about Marty coming home to his grass cut and Rust being in his house. But I realized I was still able to save the point that I was really trying to highlight, which was they were having this kind of like macho feel each other out situation. But in my mind, it was like, maybe you shouldn't have drawn attention to that, because part of the reason why you're paying attention to that is because of the significant things that will come later.
Yeah, I do remember that. And when you brought that up, I was like, are you careful?
Yeah. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 8, the finale of True Detective season 1, and kind of our wrap up to this season of TVNS. You can find True Detective available on Max. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of TVNS, and thank you to Patrick and Nate for joining us on this journey. Now that we have fully fleshed out and unpacked and dissected a beloved show for both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. It's a lot of fun. Well, our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so we're so glad you spent time with us as we journeyed through True Detective Season 1. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. drop us a review letting us know your thoughts about True Detective Season 1 and the finale. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at tvnspod or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back eventually with a new season of TV and Us. We will see what show we will be reviewing next. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll be back very soon.